Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever you're tuning in. This is another episode of Tailgate Trashtalk, brought to you by Backyard Sports. I've got a little happier Bentley with me this week as Clayton White has found the pink slip that was left in his locker for him. How you doing, bud?
Gary, our long national nightmare is over. The team that held Clemson this weekend to 0 offensive touchdowns has since fired their defensive coordinator. And I'm happy about it? Question mark? I mean, Kate Klubnik, not a great quarterback. We all know this, but Clayton White, like you said, found the pink slip after almost getting this defense kind of in order. Nick Emanwari, 2 picks in 2 weeks. It's like, maybe they found something, but I'm glad he's gone. I feel good.
It's been a mess for so long that one game, I guess, isn't gonna save it, and that's what old Shane Beamer said. Sorry, yep. Clayton. Appreciate your effort in Week 13, but you gotta go.
Yep. You cannot give up a 4th and 12 on a game-winning drive to a Florida team at home and keep your job. It just doesn't happen.
No, writing was on the wall.
Yep.
Speaking of Week 13, let's jump right into it. We had a push out the gates. That's never fun. Kissing your sister. Mississippi knocks off their Egg Bowl rival, Mississippi State, by 10. So we get the 1 in the far right column this week. But let's dive right in. We'll save the big game for last. So let's highlight something for me here.
Yeah. Should we talk about how Georgia kind of sleptwalk? In Atlanta,
the two SEC teams that are about to face off for that title kind of sleptwalk, huh? Georgia, though, against Georgia Tech, much more surprising, I think.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, as I'm looking at it right now, Georgia is 4-7-1 against the spread this year, which is not incredible if you're looking for a team that you feel should or has the talent to really dominate teams up and down the board, as we kind of have come to expect from a Bulldogs team. Now, they did get it going a little bit in the second half. Maybe they got some turkey in their system at halftime and decided they wanted to come out and play and really establish dominance over Georgia Tech team. But my favorite takeaway from this game was in Kirby Smart's post-game press conference. Somebody asked him, hey, was this kind of a look-ahead week? Are you thinking about Alabama, yada, yada, all this stuff? And he goes, what do you mean, man? We just played for the state championship. Come on, dude. Come on. You struggled with Georgia
We all
Tech.
know better.
Yeah. What is it? The rambling
wreck of Georgia Tech.
The rambling wreck of Georgia Tech is not walking out that door, brother. You guys did not play great. Now, to be fair, Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers, and another one of the receivers, whose name I'm forgetting, did not play in this game.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's a tune-up. We get Brock Bowers back last week. Unexpectedly, we give him a week off before the championship game. I just thought it was interesting that Georgia kind of sleptwalked through a rivalry game.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned they're 4-7-1. Jason, what's up? Glad to see you back. But they're 4-7-1 against the spread on the season, and I think that's a product of a couple of things, right? One, it's what we've come to expect from them, but they early in the season they were struggling a little bit in terms of getting, the offense going. The quarterback play wasn't great early in the season. They didn't really dominate up front the way we came to expect from them. Now, as the season went on, they got better, but they also were facing big numbers. Every week, Vegas had a big number on Georgia, and it's it's hard to cover 4 scores every damn week, right?
Yep.
We have seen them do so in the past, but they're a little bit different team this year. I think they've got it going. It's going to be a good game this coming weekend. But yeah, it was surprising still because Georgia Tech's not good. They're not good. They got boat raced by a couple of former FCS teams this year, so not great. I do think that whatever Kirby wants to say about state championship, you sat down your 2 most talented pass catchers. Plus, you mentioned they had a third, and his name's eluding me as well. But that's your third option in the passing game, and he's sitting out as well. you clearly were looking ahead to Alabama, making sure that McConkey and Bowers were healthy, right? We got them healthy going into the SEC title game. Georgia Tech was never going to actually beat Georgia. It really was just surprising. Like, it seemed like they couldn't get going. They were in trouble early, right? And we've seen that from time to time. But man, they got it going finally, but it took a long time for them to come out of that slumber.
Yeah,
for sure. Speaking of sleepwalking, man, we gotta tear this weird Band-Aid off. Auburn fans have to be so disappointed in kind of how this played out. It was the overachieving Tigers for all of 59 minutes and 32 seconds. And they go into this 4th and 31, 4th and goal from the 31. And
because they muffed a punt, by the way.
Right after they muffed the punt, right? They basically had Bama on the ropes, and they let them off. And then they get them on the ropes again, and they rush 2.
Yep.
They drop 9 into coverage, but then they put 7 dudes in the very middle of the field and give one-on-one on the outside. And we see just what happened, right? Isaiah Bond is one of the better wide receivers the second half of this year. We talked a lot about early, were they going to figure out the talent? Who was going to be the guy? It seems like Isaiah Bond is kind of coming to his own, and he's been one of those dudes that we've seen out of Alabama for probably the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And you give him one-on-one in a crucial situation. I've seen a lot of posts about push-off. Listen, the DB was holding him too.
Yeah.
So offsetting, whatever, if you want to call it, rerun it again, you probably would fuck it up again, Auburn, because that was terrible. Talk to me about, what this game meant in terms of, like, do you trust Bama going into the SEC title game after kind of laying an egg like this in the Iron Bowl? Were they looking ahead to Georgia?
I really want to say that they were, because I want to pick Alabama this weekend. But does Nick Saban ever overlook Auburn? Right? I think that he might still wake up in the middle of the night and just hear Chris Davis, like, he hears footsteps in the hallway, and it's just Chris Davis.
Auburn's going to win the football game.
Auburn's going to win the game. Yeah, like, the only thing that makes sense to me is that the players were not up for it individually, right? Because I don't think that Nick Saban ever overlooks an Auburn team. You look, the USF game, whatever, maybe, I don't know. That was a weird game this year that, maybe he just gave Tommy Reese the keys for the week and was like, hey, you play your quarterback, we'll figure it out. Like, just don't lose type deal, right?
They almost lost.
Taking
it back.
Yeah, he said I'd had enough, right? It was just a weird game. Like, weird things happened in the Iron Bowl. There's no way to explain what happened, right? Auburn muffs a punt, and then they freaking give up a 4th and 31 or 4th and goal from the 31. Like that. Those are just things that bad football teams do, and Auburn was a bad football team this year, right?
Yep.
There's no explanation in my mind as to why Alabama had to put themselves in that situation to convert a 4th and goal from the 31 to win that game. But they did, and that's the difference between an all-time great organization and just a good organization who had a bad team, right? Because that's historically what Auburn is. They're not a great, historical organization. They're good.
They get up once in a while.
Yeah, I mean, they make runs every once in a while, but they're not the Alabama, right? And the Alabamas are the teams that figure out how to win games like this one this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the dichotomy of what happened with Auburn too is, like, they got beat by 24 points just last week by a team that they paid nearly $1.5 million to come into their house and get their ass kicked.
Yep.
And then they went and got their own ass kicked. It's crazy. New Mexico State, like, 34-10 over Auburn?
Yeah.
What are we talking about? It's crazy. And then Auburn goes and plays an incredible game against Alabama. I caught most of this game on the radio because I was traveling that day for family, family Thanksgiving. We were celebrating after the holiday. But The radio, I was listening to the Alabama broadcast, and you
Mhm.
could feel it, man. They, like, as the first half especially progressed, you could feel it. It was palpable in the broadcast that they were
Yeah.
like, I hope we figure this thing out at some point. Like, it's just like every time that like Auburn made a play or Bama made a mistake, you could just feel like there was real tension in that broadcast booth. And it probably results from what you mentioned, right? Weird things happen in the Iron Bowl. Nick Saban tries to kick a 59-yard field goal, and Chris Davis runs it 109 yards to the house on the last play of the game, in a game that decided who was going to the national championship basically that
Yeah.
year. And Auburn goes on to win the national championship that year. So I don't know, man. It's such a weird thing. But I did notice that from the broadcast that like you could feel it in the booth. They were like, "Oh my God, is this happening? Is this are we gonna do this with Auburn?" So just wild, man. The Iron Bowl definitely can get weird for sure.
We should, I think, take a minute to pour some out for SEC on CBS. That was the last SEC on CBS
Yeah,
regular season game we're gonna get. They've had it for 24 years, man. I
yeah.
gotta miss that crew. That's my favorite
That's
broadcast
a good
crew.
crew, man. It's a
Uh,
good crew.
yeah, it's my favorite production. Obviously, Kirk and Herbie do a great job on. Kirk and Herbie are the same person. Um, it's Reese Davis, right?
Reese, yeah,
Yeah,
Kirk.
Reese and Kirk do a great job on Saturday nights. But the Saturday afternoon games with CBS will never, or without CBS, will never be the same, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You know, that's kind of an institution, right? SEC games in the afternoon on CBS. So
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. TV deals, man. It's money flying around and whatever, whatever. Not my money to spend, I guess.
Fair enough.
Wish it was.
Yeah, right.
Oh, well, what's another game you want to talk about here?
Well, we should talk about Washington barely squeaking one out against Washington
Goodness,
State, right? At
my
home.
goodness.
Washington, I believe last week we talked about them having like a 60 play yard or 60 yard drive that took like 10 or 11 plays or something like that, right? They had another one this week to close out the game.
Yep.
When you think of Washington, you think of high flying,
Yep.
quick strike, Roma Dunze down the sideline type deal, or I guess the middle of the field, even where Penix can also throw the ball. But to close this game out, they got the ball back with a minute 59 on the clock after Washington State punted to them. They went on a 2-minute drive to close the game out and only went 65 yards on 12 plays. Now, that's, 5+ yards a play or whatever. But again, that's not what you think of from this Washington team. Now there were miscues and whatnot throughout the rest of the game where they really struggled on offense and they needed a field goal to win this game. But I think it says a lot about this team that to not play their best game in a rivalry game, to be able to hold the ball, possess it for the final 2 minutes and never give Washington State a chance to get the ball back. I think it says a lot about that team to be able to rally and do that.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And we know they can run the ball, right? We also know that Penix can strike from 60 yards at any time he wants, but it has been. I mean, back-to-back weeks, you're talking about it, and I think they had one against Oregon too late in that game that they, bleeded at least some of the clock, and
Right.
not normally what you think from these spread offenses that are just going to pile it up, and especially now with like the clock moving, after first downs until you get inside of 4 minutes and stuff like that. It's this clock management piece can mean a lot more now, and that is a feather in the cap of Washington. I'm curious, I know we're going to talk about the game, but like this felt like yet another game that Washington down the stretch here has gone from like this huge win against Oregon to get to, I think they went to 7-0 after that game, to like surviving basically.
Yeah.
Down the stretch here. It's been so weird. Whereas on the other side of this Pac-12 championship game, Oregon lost to Washington and said, you know what? We're making a push for both, one, to show that we're coming back for the Pac-12 championship, but also to get Bo Nix a Heisman, right? Like they've really been pouring it on lately. So it is going to be interesting, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but it is interesting to see kind of the two trajectories of these teams. They're almost moving in kind of opposite directions. We saw that a little bit in the Big 12 as well. It was weird how after a big rivalry game and a big win for both of those two teams, Washington's been able to stay undefeated, but they haven't looked great doing it.
They've been adopting the survive and advance methodology.
Really? Like they thought it was March or something.
It almost reminds you a little bit of what I talked about last week with Ohio State and Michigan, where Michigan early in the year, everybody was like, oh, they're really, really, really good. And then somewhere in the middle, at least to me, it like flipped where Ohio State started, their offense picked up a little bit. Travion Henderson got healthy. Marvin Harrison was picking it up. And then all of the Jim Harbaugh stuff happens. You know, their offense doesn't look as dynamic. The 32 runs against Penn State. Now, obviously, Michigan ended up winning this weekend, and we can talk about that. But I see similar trajectories between what happened in the Pac-12 and what happened in the Big Ten with Washington and Oregon. Oregon picking up all the steam late in the year, sort of similar to what Ohio State's going to happen. And we get a rematch in the Pac-12 championship game Friday night, similar to what we saw. Obviously, it wasn't a matchup, but like these two titans of teams in Michigan and Ohio State playing this weekend kind of to decide it all.
Yep, for sure. Faux show. What else you want to highlight?
I don't know if you had eyes on this game, but it was my favorite game to watch this weekend. It was Farmageddon. It was Iowa State and Kansas State, man. That game.
I bet this game.
Oh, nice.
I bet Kansas State.
Oh, not nice.
To lay the points. and then I said I pull up to the fucking. I was watching the game with a buddy of mine. We were watching it over a drink. I belly up to the fucking bar and I look. It's fucking snowing like mayhem in Manhattan, Kansas. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't have bet the spread team in the snow. I would have bet Iowa State, I think, if I knew it was going to snow. Yeah, it was like Farmageddon. It was, dude, they got like a foot of snow during this game.
Yeah, during the game. Like, it was crazy. Kansas State had a punt at one point that landed at Iowa State's like 3-yard line and stopped at Iowa State's 2-yard line because it never touched the ground. Yeah, it never touched the ground. It just hit snow and stopped.
Yep.
My favorite takeaway from this game, though, because it was absolutely electric. If you love big plays,
oh yeah.
At one point, Iowa State had 35 points scored, so 5 touchdowns, and they had run 2 offensive plays on Kansas State's side of the field.
Yep.
That was the best. That was my favorite stat of the weekend.
Yep. This game reminded me too of, remember when Shady McCoy went for like 7,000 yards against the Lions in the snow? Yep. That was fun to watch because it was big plays on both sides, but McCoy ended up with like gaudy numbers. Yep. That's kind of what this game reminded me of, is like neither defense had a chance against these offenses. So
yeah.
Oh,
Abu Sama, the Iowa State running back, averaged 17 yards a carry. He carried the ball only 16 times.
That's 8-man football numbers.
Oh, yeah. Like, that's incredible, man. I mean, just insane stuff.
Yeah.
They had their receiver, Jalen Noel, 53 yards a catch. He had 3 of them. And 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Like, and that was the one, I don't know if you remember this play specifically, but they threw kind of like, it was like an 11-yard out route to the right. He made like 4 guys miss in a phone booth and then took it 82 yards for a touchdown.
Yep.
Like they broke it down on the broadcast, but like I watched it happen in real time. They're playing thirds coverage. They're covering a third of the field where the ball goes with like 6 defenders.
I know.
And he scores. It was insane.
Yeah. There were a couple of those plays that kind of broke my back when I realized like K-State minus 10.5 is not going to hit.
No, not they couldn't do anything, K-State on defense, and that was incredible.
Not at all.
This is a team that almost beat Texas in Texas.
Yes.
Yep. Probably should have.
I want to highlight a team we've been talking a lot about down the stretch here, swamping their in-state rival, Arizona State. Just smashed them, covered easily, covered by halftime. Arizona, looking at the news, and we're going to talk about this between weeks, but looking at the news in the coaching circle right now, if Arizona is able to keep Jed Fish, what like going into next season, do you think this is sustainable for Arizona?
I don't see why it wouldn't be. I mean, this is a team playing a true freshman quarterback who's only going to get better going into next year, and we know that. So they're switching conferences, right? They're going Pac-12 to Big 12. That just increases the likelihood of them receiving transfers. It opens up a whole new recruiting base, right? They can get guys. They can continue to get guys from the West Coast. They can get their Polynesian brethren over there from Hawaii, But it also opens up to meat graders in the in the Midwest, right? They can go and get guys. They can steal guys from that freaking Iowa team now because they're playing in the Big 12, which overlaps with the Big 10, right? It opens up so many more possibilities for Jed Fish to go out and get guys that complement the style of play that he wants to play, right?
Yep.
I don't. This is all if Jed Fish stays, which there are still some openings that have yet to be filled, and that usually means that they're going to hire a guy who's playing in a conference championship. Jed Fish is not doing that. However, the way these coaching carousels break down is different each year. But if Jed Fish does in fact stay, I don't see why this wouldn't be sustainable. And they could be competing with Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12.
That was
Arizona,
the point I wanted to make too, is that
they're
losing the two powerhouses of that conference.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
They could come in and compete for the Big 12 right away if they continue to play at the same level they're playing right now.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, they're young at the most important position. And like you said, it's going to open up some more avenues. They may not in year one steal a bunch of those guys from the Midwest, but it's going to open up those avenues, and they can just continue to get better from here, for sure. Cool. What else you want to highlight from last week?
How about Oklahoma State going down 24-6? Or maybe they weren't down 24-6. Excuse me. They got outscored 24-6 in the first half.
Yeah.
And then freaking turned it on and scored 27 in the second half, and came back to beat a BYU team in double overtime.
Yeah.
That I took Oklahoma State to cover the -16, and boy was I wrong.
Yeah, very, very wrong. We got that one so wrong.
Yeah, it could not have been more wrong.
Yeah. Fortunately for Oklahoma State, though, they salvaged their appearance in the Big 12 championship.
Yes, they did. And let me tell you what, Ollie Gordon. Yeah. Remember that name for next year, man.
Yep.
If there's going to be a running back that could make a push for the Heisman, next year might be the year with this kid.
Yeah, for sure. He's the real fucking deal.
Yeah, another 160-yard, 5-touchdown performance out of him.
Yep. All right, well, before we get to the big game, I want to talk a little bit about Utah, Colorado.
Ooh.
Because Shedeur Sanders didn't play.
Mm-hmm.
And Utah really struggled at home with Colorado. What happened this weekend with this? Like this, I expected this to be an absolute fucking blowout because Colorado's starting a backup quarterback that they probably didn't even really want on the roster because although they've had some decommitments this week, they had like 3 quarterbacks from like top 200 committed next year to come to Colorado. They've had a couple of guys decommit, and I think it's because of roster composition, opportunities elsewhere. Maybe there's some rumors that Deion's not going to be there. I don't know. But all that considered, I thought Utah was going to just run roughshod over this Colorado team. Is this a momentum builder maybe for Colorado, or was this just really just kind of a stub your toe game for Utah?
It's tough to say it's a momentum builder because they lost. I think that players and coaches care less about gambling spreads than maybe do degenerates like yourself and I.
That's a fair point.
So, to say it's a momentum builder, I probably would not go that far. I think maybe that Colorado team is headed in the wrong direction. Just the recruiting class is not great coming in next year. Shedeur, nobody really knows if he's going to play again or not. They're not going to a bowl game. I think what really caused the stumble or toe stub from Utah here, if we want to talk about it that way, is I believe they played their fourth quarterback of the season in this game. Maybe they're the third quarterback of the year.
Yeah.
He only threw the ball 10 times. They're probably checked out on the year, if I'm being completely honest. They're already in a bowl game. They didn't need to win this game to make a bowl. They held Colorado to 17, which is fine. Like, typically, if you hold a team to 17, you're going to win the game.
Yeah.
Excuse me, unless it's Iowa. But you might win 2 weeks in a row if you can score 17 against Iowa.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that you and I are in agreement that this was almost a lost season for Utah, right? With Cam Rising being out for the whole year, it's almost like Kyle Rittenhouse was like, we're going to compete as hard as we possibly can. Don't get me wrong. Nobody was taking the year off. But we understood that without Cam Rising, this was not a national title, even a Pac-12 contender, truthfully.
Yep.
And I think that this game, again, playing their third or fourth quarterback this season, we understood that they know that they're not that upper echelon of team right now, and they kind of are just waiting to get to their bowl game and almost move to next year to get Cam back, hopefully.
Yeah. I hope so too. Honestly, I hope he comes back because I do think that with him, they certainly would have been a contender in the Pac-12, and I think nationally.
Yeah.
I don't know that defense. I don't know many teams that would want to see that defense in a national semifinal.
No.
Right. I mean, they are suffocating at times. They're fast. They're big. They're strong at all three levels, and they're really well coached.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for sure. I think next year, especially if they can keep together the core of that defense and continue to improve, Cam Rising's just a playmaker too. So they should be much, much better on offense next year. Hey, Dad. Thanks for joining.
I want to ask you about a game, Gary.
Yeah. What's up?
There's a game that was very interesting this weekend because it involves a team that you finally bought into in the Louisville Cardinals. And the week that you buy into them, they go out and lay an absolute stinker in a state rivalry game against Kentucky.
Yeah.
Give me some thoughts about Louisville, man.
Fuck Louisville. I spent the whole damn season saying I don't trust Louisville. And every week it would burn me. And every week we would sit on this show and I would say, is Louisville actually good? And you would say, probably. And I would say, again, I don't trust them. I'd pick against them again. And they would burn me again. And then I finally, in week 13 against Kentucky, who's pretty decimated in terms of injuries, I picked Louisville to cover, and they lost fucking outright.
Yep.
So much for their national playoff chance. They are not going to make it, even if they beat Florida State. But, man, and I felt it early, too, because they were just – Kentucky was running it down their throats. They were being physical. They were bullying them, a lot like we'd seen when they had broken into the top 25, what they were doing to teams.
Yeah, it's tough. It was tough, man. When you lose the turnover battle 3-1, it's hard to win games.
It's hard. Oh,
they did possess the ball for 13 minutes more than Kentucky. They just turned it over at very costly times.
Deep in territory too.
Yes,
a couple of times, but that's the perils of degeneracy. All right, well, let's get into it, man. Game of the week, game of the year, probably to this point. I think we've got a couple this weekend that are going to be really important in terms of the college football playoff, but maybe the most important regular season game that we've seen in terms of college football playoff rankings because they're in the same division in the Big Ten. So one of them is not going to have a chance to win a championship in their conference, which is a huge issue when you talk about the CFP selection process, but also because of kind of how everything's broken out this year, there's no realistic scenario for Ohio State to sneak into 4. It's got to be kind of this quirky scenario where like a couple of teams lose and maybe one of them loses bad, right? for Ohio State to kind of sneak in at that number 4 spot. So let's talk about this game. All the lead up, all the drama with the sign stealing scandal, the accusations thrown back and forth between Michigan fans and Ohio State fans, Ryan Day's brother, the private eye, and whether or not he was involved, and all this stuff going on. And in the end, the better team won, in my opinion. Michigan was able to overcome all of that drama, missing Jim Harbaugh, and they were able to really handle the barrage that we'd seen from Ohio State offensively down the stretch here. They've got a real NFL number 1 cornerback that showed up this weekend and had a pick, lined up one-on-one against Marvin Harrison and just beat him. And Harrison got a couple, and they, went back and forth a little bit in this game. But in the end, Michigan pulls it out, and they're headed to the Big Ten championship against an Iowa team that's going to be severely overmatched. It'll be really, really surprising if Iowa's able to pull off the upset against Michigan. So the assumption is, with their defeat of Ohio State in the Big House, they have sealed the deal to get into the college football playoff against their biggest rival. Talk to me about this game. Talk to me about some of the fallout from this game.
Yeah, so a lot of the discourse around Ohio State this year was that they're not a tough team, right? They can't run for it. In this scenario, right, at the end of the first half, they needed 1 yard to be able to pick up a first down and maybe run a couple more plays, try to get into closer field goal range. Well, Ryan Day opted to not go that route and run the clock down, and then he missed a freaking 52-yard field goal. So I tend to believe and buy into the discourse at this point that even Ryan Day did not think that his team was physical enough. Tough is probably the wrong word because these guys are out there getting hit. They're tough guys, right? Physical and strong enough to be able to push that Michigan defensive line back and get a singular yard to be able to move into a closer field goal range, right? TreVeyon Henderson had been electric 3 of the last 4 games since getting fully healthy, right? I still think the move at the end of the half was to try to get that yard and move into closer field goal range. It almost swayed the momentum of the entire game, if you will, right? You give Michigan confidence going into halftime to be able to kind of clamp down on defense. At least you suppose, right? You think, oh man, 14-10 at halftime. They had the opportunity to cut it to 1. Like, we're good. We got this. That all flips on its head in the second half, at least for the first Ohio State possession. So they came out and they got the ball. Michigan got the ball first, right? Kicked the field goal. But Ohio State gets the ball back and goes 12 plays and 75 yards, runs the ball the entire way down the field. And you're like, what are we doing, man? Like, why didn't you just do that on the last possession of the first half? I don't understand. It makes no sense.
Yep.
And then when that cornerback you were talking about goes out for Michigan, you think, oh, here we go. They're going to line up Marvin Harrison. He's going to get open. Like, maybe Ohio State has, like, they can figure it out. Not the case. The difference in this game to me, though, was not the toughness. It was not the strength. It was not being able to run the ball or whatever. The difference was J.J. McCarthy did not turn the ball over, and Kyle McCord did. And I'm not even talking about that last interception. The last interception, I don't put on Kyle McCord. The line broke down. He had pressure in his face. He got hit as he threw. That happens. It happens every week in the NFL. We see it all the time.
Yeah.
It was the early interception in the game. It was a punt fest up until that point, right? And then
swung momentum hard. Will Johnson, the name. Yeah. I knew it was like a very generic Johnson name. I couldn't think of it.
Yes, Will Johnson, very good corner.
Very.
But the early interception on Ohio State's third possession, whenever McCord just threw it right to the defense.
Yep.
That, like you said, really, really gave the momentum to Michigan in order to score first because they were down there. They got a really short field, and they were able to run the ball in. And they ran the ball all over Ohio State, really. I know the numbers are not necessarily going to bear that out directly, but if you watch the game, which I did, if there are any police officers listening, please do not pay attention to what I'm about to say. I watched the game on my phone on it was blocking my speedometer as I was driving home from Columbia, South Carolina this weekend.
Set the cruise, you're good to go.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? But but I was able to watch the game, so I did see everything that happened, right? And Michigan was able to do basically whatever they wanted on offense because they had Loveland, their tight end, just running free in the middle of the linebacking core, which is very strange because Ohio State has good linebackers. And I the only thing I could think during this game, because I did pick Ohio State to win, and if McCord doesn't throw that early interception, I still think they probably do. I still just think Ohio State's a really freaking good team.
Yep.
The only thing I could think watching this game was, man, if Loveland is constantly open against this linebacking core, what is Brock Bowers going to do?
Oh my God.
Like, that's all I could think of. But obviously, none of that happened. Sharon Moore said before the game he was going to be the most aggressive coach this weekend, and he was. He was 3 for 3 on fourth downs in the first half. I mean, those are the things you have to do to win a rivalry game against a top 5 opponent.
Yep.
And they did it.
Yeah, when it's this tight. And yeah, that's a good point that, we don't want to lose it because we gave them a hard time for the second half against Penn State, right? So we have to give them the same credit for the decision making in this game. And you mentioned it, 3 for 3 on fourth down in the first half. That comes out, that makes a statement. That's the sort of thing that can really help your team, help galvanize your team as well, right? I trust you guys. We're going on these fourth downs. I trust my defense, but I also trust my offense to go get this fourth down.
Yeah.
And he made good on his word, right? He said it. He delivered. We hear that a lot, like Iowa, right? We mentioned them a couple of times. They talked about how we're going to be aggressive on offense. We put it in the contract of our offensive coordinator, who's the son of the head coach, that we're going to score at least 25 points a game. They've gone months without 25 points.
Oh God.
But yeah, I mean, Moore, he delivered, right? And in turn, the players delivered on what he was selling. So huge game, obviously, in terms of the grand scheme of college football. It's so great that this is a game that stays on the last weekend of the season as well, because we've had this build up for 12 weeks leading into week 13. They stayed on the collision course, right, of being undefeated, and this being sort of the de facto Big 12 or Big 10 championship, barring a unbelievable miracle of Iowa knocking Michigan off this weekend.
One more note on this game.
Yep.
The actual thing that swung this game, if we want to get really technical about it, was the second touchdown that Michigan scored, the pass to Roman Wilson. That was a fumble, right? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I know which one you're talking about. Yeah. So
because he gets it ripped, he catches, takes a step, doesn't really have possession. His second step carries him into the end zone and then gets ripped out. It's like, I think by the letter of the law, that's a fumble.
Yeah, I think if they had called it a fumble on the field on replay, they may have had a hard time overturning it. If they had called it incomplete on the field, replay would have had a hard time overturning it. They called it a touchdown on the field, and I think that's why replay had a hard time overturning it. In my opinion, it's an incomplete pass. I don't think it's a fumble. I think so because he's in the end zone before the ball actually gets ripped out. I would be more inclined to say incomplete pass than fumble, because by the letter of the law, when the ball crosses the plane, the play is dead, essentially, with the only exception being establishing possession for a catch. Everything else, once the ball crosses the plane of the goal line, the play's over. So when I watched the replay, I thought it would be an incomplete pass. I think it's because they called it a touchdown on the field that they just literally, I think that's one of those plays that no matter what they had called it on the field, I don't think they were going to overturn any of them, which rarely happens, right? We don't see plays that you can definitively look at and say, if they called it one way, I don't know that they could overturn it versus the other way. That it was so close. I would have been inclined to say incomplete pass I understand the argument for fumble. I also understand Michigan fans saying, no, it's touchdown, right? So, no, I'm with you. I think that is that's a big momentum play as well, right? For sure, 100%. And if they had called it a fumble on the field and Ohio State got possession of the ball, that would have really swung momentum the other way. So, yeah, that's a crucial play in the game for sure.
Yeah. Well, the Big Ten does have a history of overturning touchdown plays by review. Just ask Iowa in their special teams unit.
That's still the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen on replay. I still can't even rationalize how that happened. I don't
Should
get
never
it.
have happened.
I
Should never have happened.
I don't get it. I don't get it. Even in the least bit, I don't understand how they overturn that.
Nope.
Ugh. All right. Yeah. Onward and upward. We get to watch that Iowa team this weekend.
Yes, we do.
Not that they're going to be competitive, but we've got some big numbers for championship weekend. I was a little surprised by a few of them. Oregon being 9.5 over Washington.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to necessarily demean. Let's not skip past Liberty versus New Mexico State here, but it's an also ran game. New Mexico State knocked off Auburn, playing for a conference championship, but we're on opposite sides of this. I think it's going to be a competitive game. Liberty undefeated, number 25 in the country as well. Hats off to them. They lost Hugh Freeze after the Malik Willis era, and I sort of myself thought maybe they would fall apart. It's clear they haven't. They've been able to reload, retool, and still compete in a lesser conference. But all right, Oregon, Washington. I want to get your thoughts on this because we both went plus 9.5 on this, right? We took the 9.5 with Washington. I thought the number was disrespectful. I want to get your thoughts. What do you think about that number? Oregon being 9.5 point favorite over Washington?
Yeah, it's just too much. It's too many points. Washington has already beaten them. Their offense at times this year has been lethal and electric. Their defense has been similar at certain points, right? If they are able to kind of do what Texas did this last weekend and put them both together at the same time, they could probably beat anybody. Now they do not have the advantage of being at home. They don't have the home field advantage, but you have to imagine there's going to be a lot of fans from both sides at this game, right? So it should be a true neutral site. It's on turf. There's not going to be any weather that really favors the offense of Washington. We saw them struggle in Beaver Stadium. But it's just too many points. Washington can score points. They can put up points. I still think Oregon's going to win the game. Don't get me wrong. I'm picking Oregon to win the game. But it's too many points, in my opinion. That's a disrespectful number to a team who's undefeated and has put up gaudy numbers this year at different times.
Yeah, I expected this number to be like 2.5. And I expected Oregon to be the favorite. I won't, make a complaint about that in terms of Vegas. But 9.5, it is too much. I agree with you. Also, the consideration for where they're playing, the surface they're playing on, the fact they're not going to be dealing with weather potentially, right? That they have struggled in the elements in a couple of these late games as well. It's the Pacific Northwest, right? But I'm actually picking Washington to win this, but I think it's going to be by a field goal at most, right? And I would have expected this to be 2.5 for Oregon. Even if Washington was the favorite, I wouldn't have expected it to be more than 2.5. I did think it was going to be Oregon by a field goal, but too many points. I'm not going to wager the money line because I think this game is that tight. I'm going to pick Washington to win for funsies. I'm not going to put my actual money on it. But what I will put my actual money on is 9.5 because I don't think Oregon blows them out. And to me, 10 points in this game, I would classify as a blowout. Unless it's a weird touchdown late. But I think this game is going to be that tight that whoever's got the ball last is probably going to win this game. And it means to me that they're going to win probably by a field goal.
Yeah, that's fair.
Speaking of Texas, you mentioned them a moment ago, a 50 burger. Not only did they score 50, they won by 50 against in-state semi-rival Texas Tech. talk to me about this game. Oklahoma State's coming off a bad loss to UCF and almost a bad loss to BYU, which they wouldn't have been in this game if they had lost to BYU. They sneak away with a win in double overtime, and now they've got to welcome Texas to the fray. 14.5. You're going to lay the points. I'm taking the points with Oklahoma State. I am picking Texas to win. I just don't know that it's going to be by 15. I could be way wrong, judging by the way Texas played last week.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this game? You've been on the Texas train all year. I'm getting on late. How do you feel about this game, though?
Yeah, I mean, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. You said it. I've been on Texas all year long. I hope that they're able to carry over their success from last week into this weekend. They, like I said, they put it together, right? Their offense and their defense, everything clicked last week. You know, we saw Arch Manning finally.
Yeah.
I think he's solidified his spot as at least the backup, probably the starter next year if Quinn Ewers leaves, which there's a lot of smoke that he's not going to leave, which is interesting to me. I think that Texas can beat anybody on any given night, right? If they play complimentary football like they did last week.
Yeah.
That being said, Mike Gundy has been around for a long time and he knows how to get his boys up. I should have phrased that differently. He knows how to coach up his team. And Ollie Gordon,
Phrasing.
Yeah, phrasing. Ollie Gordon is the real fucking deal, man. That dude is electric at running back. He maybe the best in the country, right? If he's able to get loose and break a couple big ones and kind of tilt the field, is Sarkisian going to be able to rally the troops and get his boys back in line? I think that it will not come to that. I don't think that Oak State will be able to break the big ones. We know that they run the ball to pass up or to set up the pass rather than the opposite. I just think that Texas has too many horses, or too many longhorns, I guess, if you want to say that. Too many herds. Yeah, they have too many heads in their herd. They have the better athletes. They have the better roster up and down the lines. I think that Texas wins this game pretty handily. Also because they may need style points to get into the college football playoff.
That's fair. They've got the reason the motivation to embarrass Oklahoma State if they have the opportunity.
Yep.
I think Texas wins. I think it's probably by 10 to 14, maybe 2 scores, right? I don't think they're going to win by more than 14. Only because you mentioned it, Ollie, right? I think Oklahoma State's going to be able to run the ball enough to kind of slow the pace of this game down. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball well enough against Texas to, as you put it, tilt the field and really take advantage and take control of this game. I think they're going to be able to slow it down. I think they're going to be able to keep it close. And that's why I think it's going to be less than 14 points. So that's why I took the points, but I am not taking Oklahoma State to win this game, and I don't think it's going to be all that close. I just don't think it's going to be an utter blowout, which, Texas probably needs in terms of the style points, but I don't think they're going to blow them out like that.
Yeah.
All right. Miami, Toledo. We love Central America here, or Middle America. Central America. We love Middle America here and football in the Midwest. Not a whole lot about this. We both took the points. This is probably going to be a tight game. 7.5 felt like a lot for, this conference and these two teams. I just think that should be a tight game. Georgia, Bama. So I've got to ask. You kind of alluded to it earlier. I'm taking the points. You're taking the points. Are you taking Bama to win this game?
No. And I did not want to take the points. It doesn't feel like enough points for Georgia. But Nick Saban is 4-1 versus Kirby Smart. They're much better against the spread this year is Alabama than is Georgia. And similar to strange things happening in the Iron Bowl, as confidently as I can say that strange things do happen in the Iron Bowl, I can confidently say that Alabama plays really freaking well in Atlanta. It just does. I've physically seen them play football games in Alabama in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I've been there. They are very freaking good in that stadium. The analysis that I can give for this game would not outweigh my gut feeling that Alabama's just good.
Yep. Yep. I'm taking Bama, man. I am. I think that as the season has progressed, Alabama has gotten better in ways that will help them against Georgia. And the Nick Saban factor, I think they're playing good football. And I think that one, weird things happen in the Iron Bowl, but also I I do think that if Saban wasn't, a lot of these players were looking ahead. But I also think that performance and escaping like that couldn't have come at a better time for Nick to just fucking tear some asses up. Maybe sacrifice a redshirt freshman this week just to prove a point and get these boys ready for this game. I think that they up front are better than they have been in the past in terms of matching up against Georgia's defensive front.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Jalen Milroe has figured out who he is, and we've talked about that, right? It's 4th and 31 or it's tuck and run, right?
Yep.
And they have two running backs now that as the season has gone, they really have figured out how to use those two running backs and pair them and complement each other. It sort of feels like what we've seen from them in the past with guys like, Gibbs and Jacobs and Ingram and Henry and all these guys that, they seem to always, when they're at their best, they have a two-headed attack, behind the quarterback. It feels like that noise we've been hearing all year is going to continue this week, and the Tide are going to roll. And I say that knowing full well that we're probably going to see this game twice if that's the case, because I don't think there's a team that's going to knock off Georgia or Bama, depending on seeding. Texas, of course, we know has matched up well against Alabama and beaten them. But I could see a scenario where Alabama's number 2 and Georgia's number 4, and we don't see that matchup until the championship. And I don't know that Michigan can beat Georgia, and I don't know that Washington or Oregon can beat Alabama. And it's really going to depend on whether Texas can get in, right? If that Washington-Oregon game goes weird, or if Iowa somehow knocks off Michigan, I just think we're going to end up seeing Alabama-Georgia twice in the next month and a half.
So you think if Alabama wins this weekend, then Texas is out?
Unfortunately.
So
I think that's what the CFP is going to do.
And, well, you're picking Washington to win.
I think Washington or Oregon, whoever wins that, is going to get in.
Over Texas. This all hinges on Alabama winning the game.
All does, absolutely. I think if Alabama wins, Michigan wins, Washington or Oregon, I think Oregon's picked up a lot of momentum with the CFP committee because of their style points. And if Texas goes and hangs 50 on Oklahoma State, maybe that changes some perception. But I also think Oklahoma losing the 2 games that they lost really hurts Texas.
Yeah.
Because that's their loss. If Bama beats Georgia, I think the CFP committee is going to go Michigan, Alabama, Georgia, Pac-12 champion. Or you can flip those two. Michigan, Alabama, Pac-12 champion, Georgia.
Okay.
And it'll be Michigan against Georgia, Bama against Pac-12 champion, and we'll get Bama and Georgia in the championship game.
Okay, well, let's jump to the bottom of the list then and talk about Florida State.
I think they're losing this weekend. I'm making that assumption.
Okay.
I jumped ahead in the games.
No, that's fine. I was just curious because if Florida State wins, you leave
that changes the CFP committee. It does.
Yeah, because then if Alabama wins, Oregon wins, Florida State wins, then that puts a 1-loss SEC champion probably in, an undefeated Michigan in, a 1-loss Pac-12 champion in, and that leaves you with 1-loss Georgia, 1-loss Texas, and 1-loss Washington. And undefeated Florida State, right?
Yep. If that plays out, I think Georgia's out.
Probably.
I think Georgia's out if that plays out. I think that would then give us probably Michigan, 1-loss Bama with the SEC championship, undefeated Florida State, and
The Pac-12 champion.
probably Pac-12 champion. Probably, I think, in the eyes of the CFP committee. But maybe that Texas heads up against Bama. If they win the SEC championship, they may move it. If Washington's undefeated, it's a moot point because you're not putting one-loss Texas in over an undefeated Pac-12 champion. But if Oregon wins, that's when you get the debate for sure.
How much of a poetic justice moment would it be if a one-loss Oregon gets left out of the playoff in the last year of the Pac-12?
Oh, that would be an incredible storyline.
Oh man,
talk about, man. I almost want that to happen now.
Oh, that'd be so fun. Pac-12 has 2 one-loss teams that could beat anybody on any given day, and they're just out.
They're just
because Florida State somehow squeaked out a freaking win over like a 1-point win over Louisville, and with a backup quarterback.
Yeah. I love how much drama we potentially could have from this weekend. Like this weekend had like I felt almost like that Zach Galifianakis, like the math weird meme gif that exists out there, like going through some of these scenarios in my head of like, where do I for the totem, right? Where do I rank him and how do I think it's going to play out? But also like, how many awesome scenarios could we have, right? Like Louisville wins and Oregon wins and Bama wins and Iowa wins, right? Is one loss Michigan out, right? Those sorts of things. It's very interesting to me how this is I can't remember a year of the college football playoff that felt this nip tuck.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've got the best in terms of a lineup for the playoff that we've seen in the college football playoff, but we've got the closest in terms of like jostling for position. It's that Texas win over Alabama that makes this so interesting, though.
Yep.
Right? It's that one game, really, that makes this so intriguing.
Yep.
And the fact that we got a rematch in the Pac-12 championship as well.
Yeah,
has a lot to do with it. But that Texas win over Bama is like the wrench in the gear that you put in, and you're just like, we're going to fuck this whole thing up.
Yep. And next year, that's a conference game.
Yes. Yep. Man. All right. Moving along, we got our Tulane Green Wave against SMU. If you're wagering this one, bet the over. SMU's won a lot of overs this year.
Yep.
I think Tulane's going to move the ball, and I think SMU's offense is going to be able to move the ball against Tulane as well.
Yep.
Any thoughts on this game?
Willie Fritz, if Shane Beamer gets fired, please come to coach in South Carolina.
Ooh, yeah. There you go.
Or I would also take oh my God, the Liberty coach who coached at Coastal. Boy, I can't remember his name. I would be okay with him too.
Okay.
I don't want Shane Beamer fired. I don't want him fired. He has one fewer win than did Steve Spurrier in his first 3 years. I don't want him fired. I love Shane Beamer. But his seat is incredibly hot going into next season, and our schedule is tough as shit. If he does get fired, those are 2 guys I would like.
Yeah. I love
that being said, take Tulane.
yeah, for sure. App State, Troy, I was surprised by this number, to be completely honest. And I was like 8 points surprised. I thought App State would be almost a field goal favorite in this. Troy, I know, is probably better than I'm giving them credit for, but I'm taking App State, and I'm probably going to bet a money line because you don't bet against App State in big games.
Sure.
And I know this isn't a huge game on like the national stage, but this is a conference championship game.
Yep.
I'm not betting against App State.
Nope. Give me App, dude. Give me the points.
Yeah, for sure. Michigan, Iowa -23. I'm still trying to find where I can bet Iowa 0 points, right? Team total, because I think that's how many they're going to score this weekend. If Michigan scores 24, they probably cover. Any intrigue from this game? Do you think there's any chance we're going to get some drama in this game?
No. Not
Will
unless
they fire Mike Ferentz at half?
That might happen. Yeah. I mean, jeez. So you can get on different books half totals for Iowa, and you can get -104 for the under half point in the first and second half both.
I know. parlayed, I feel like I don't know if they're stealing juice on me though. That's my thing. I was like, maybe I'll just parlay them and whatnot for a same game parlay, but I don't know if they're stealing juice on me. What would it be if the whole game was minus 0.5, right? That's what I want to know. I want to know if I'm losing juice or if I'm going to have the same juice.
Your biggest fear, I think, there is JJ McCarthy throws a dumb pick and Iowa gets a short field.
Yeah.
That, I think, is your biggest fear.
And they
like Michigan muffs a punt.
Yep.
Like
that turnover, like, because they've got a good field goal kicker.
Yeah. Their special teams is elite.
Clearly, because that's all they've done all year.
Yeah. They punt and they kick field goals.
Yeah.
And play defense.
And they return punts for touchdowns that get called back.
Well, yeah. Not a touchdown. Okay?
Not a touchdown.
Not apparently. Not according to the rule book, but according to the referees.
Right. In the booth.
In the booth.
They called it a touchdown on the field, too.
Yeah, somebody in Indianapolis was like, hey, dude, I got the freaking underdog. Relax.
Oh, crazy. Oh, and rounding out the weekend, we have that big matchup in the ACC. We're both taking the points. Are you picking Louisville to win?
Yeah, I would take Louisville to win. I feel Louisville is going to have a sour taste in their mouth.
Oh, yeah.
After last week laying that egg to Kentucky. And they're playing for a championship, right? They would love to win the ACC championship in its last iteration as such. You've said it all year long. You haven't believed in them, but they're extremely fast.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Florida State is relying on at this point without Travis, is having the better athletes on the field. Well, speed kills, and Louisville's got that. So if nothing else, maybe a track meet on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not really sure how I feel about the Florida State backup quarterback. Did not instill a lot of confidence in me last week. Now maybe it's different after a full week of practice. My emotions have settled down. I don't know, but I just don't think that Louisville lays an egg 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I agree. The only concern I have picking Louisville is if Florida State can get the running game going, much like Kentucky did, then we might be in trouble. But you mentioned it, right? Their running game isn't the same kind of bully ball running game that Kentucky's is. It's athletes. It's on the edge. It's trying to get the corner. And I don't think you can really get the corner that well on this Louisville team. So I'm with you. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Louisville is going to win. But if Florida State pulls this out, it's probably because they got the running game there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into the totem for this week and wrap things up. Little bit of a change for you and little change for me as well. Ohio State fell out for both of us. I moved Texas in. You moved Texas back in as well. Talk to me about, you got Bama still on the outside looking in with Oregon and Washington playing this weekend. Talk to me. Is this is you racking and stacking the teams kind of how you see them, or is this kind of how you see the committee looking at these teams right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's so tough week to week to kind of gauge where I want to put these teams, right? So for me, like my thought process here was given the totality of where the season is to this point, where do I think the playoff committee views these teams currently? Because if it were up to me, I would have Alabama on my top 4, but I can't put them in there because they're still an undefeated team above them. And I think that Oregon is better than that undefeated team being Washington that is above Alabama, right? So I couldn't justify moving Alabama in front of those two teams, especially because it took a 4th and 31 to win that game, right? So and a muffed punt, right? Like,
yeah.
If Auburn just catches, if they just field the punt, the game is probably over.
That game, yeah.
Yeah, and then we're not even talking about Alabama in any context other than the title game, right?
Yeah.
So while I do think that Alabama is better than probably Washington and Oregon both, I can't justifiably put them in there. It's the same reason I've had Georgia and Michigan 1 and 2 all year long. They haven't moved for me because I have no justifiable reason to bump them out of their spots. Obviously, with Ohio State losing, you move them out. You mentioned it earlier. I've been on the Texas train all year long. I think that Texas any weekend could beat probably any one of these 6 teams in our totems. But I couldn't justify moving Alabama in until this weekend is over.
That's fair. And I'm going to contradict myself from 1 and 2 onward down to 3, 4, and 5, and 6. I have the same reasoning why I've got Georgia and Michigan up there. It's the winning streaks. It's the fact that I think Michigan, while they remain undefeated, I think they're one of the more complete teams in college football. I don't think they're elite at some of the positions that I would need them to be elite at to say, like, this is a national championship team for me. I don't think they're a national championship team. I do think they're going to get bounced probably in the first round of the CFP. Sorry, Maize and Blue fans. That's just the truth. You're not elite at quarterback. You're not elite in the secondary on defense outside of one guy. Your safety play is kind of shoddy at times. I think that a Georgia, I think that a Bama, I think that even those Pac-12 teams could really exploit that. And if Quinn Ewers is on his game, I think Texas can exploit that because they've got dogs. So I do think that while I believe Michigan is probably the most filled out roster in college football, I would pick Bama to beat them. I'd pick Washington. I'd probably pick Texas, and I probably would pick Oregon to beat them. But I'm not moving them out of the top 2. Now, that said, I'm going to flip the script from 3 to 6 and say I've got Bama at 3 because I think they beat the other 3 teams. I've got Washington at 4 because they're undefeated and they already beat Oregon. And I've got Texas and Oregon on the outside looking in. One of them's ready to poach a spot if one of those teams above stumbles. If Oregon beats Washington, obviously they're going to poach it. If Georgia knocks off Bama this weekend, that opens the door for both of them to get in. And as I already said, as we both talked about, I've got Louisville beating Florida State, so I moved them out. The Jordan Travis injury to me is just too much. Honestly, it's just too much. He's too goddamn good and too fucking important to that team, and losing him, I think, is just too much for that team. So that's my justification for why I've got my totem the way it is. I'm fully aware that from 1 and 2 down to 3 through 6, I contradict my thought process, but hey, it's my totem. Fight your mom.
Unless you're Corey Perry, then do nothing with anyone else's mom.
Yes. For sure.
We are versatile on this show, boys. We talk about hockey.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh man, yeah, he's home with his pink slip as well.
What a freaking I logged onto Twitter and saw that Delonte West was trending. And I was like, oh, this can't be good.
That's so perfect.
Yeah. So if any of y'all know the Delonte West story, add Corey Perry to that list of bad actors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wild.
Crazy story.
I was
gonna
say what makes it even more wild is that Connor Bedard was also the number 1 overall pick in the draft, same as LeBron James.
I know.
Like, the parallels are insane.
It is so wild, man. It's so wild. I hope we don't see Corey Perry end up in the same predicament that Delonte West has been.
Yeah.
But it is crazy, the parallels, for sure.
Yeah. Just insane.
Yeah. Well, bring us home, bud. Any closing thoughts here for championship weekend?
Yeah, I would like to give a shout out to a good friend of mine, JMU alum, Clay Hubbard. I humbly went down to the University of South Carolina this week, and I spoke to Shane Beamer directly, and I said, look, man, if you guys win this game against Clemson, you will be bowl eligible. But however, there's a bigger story here. If you lose this game, you will not be bowl eligible, but there will not be enough teams in the country bowl eligible, and it will force the NCAA to put James Madison into a bowl game. Now, did they play a ranked opponent at all this year? No. Are they worthy of a bowl game? Probably not. Are they going to get a big-time bowl and lose it? Most likely. But I would like to say that I was the bigger man, and I alone took the dive for the University of South Carolina this weekend and got the James Madison Dukes into a bowl game. So credit to me for getting JMU into a bowl game.
Listen, you are eternally the curator of vibes. All right. Well, for Bentley and everybody else here at Backyard Sports, this has been another episode of Tailgate Trash Talk. We are